Write in the comments where you are watching from and at what time, so I can get to know you better. To support the channel for free, don't forget to subscribe and like. There are voids in history not because events were forgotten, but because they were erased. Tonight we open a file that was sealed for half a century. The suppressed case of Project Chimera, and the final, inexplicable transmission it sent back from the edge of our solar system. Write in the comments where you are watching from and at what time, so I can get to know you better. To support the channel for free, don't forget to subscribe and like. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed again. Narrator. The history, we are taught, is a curated document, a highlight reel of celebrated victories and sanitized defeats. But in the margins, between the lines of official record, lie the real stories, the ones written in invisible ink and filed away in concrete vaults deep beneath the earth. Our story tonight begins in one such margin, during the iciest decade of the Cold War. While the world watched the televised spectacle of the space race, a frantic shadow competition was underway. This wasn't about planting a flag on the moon. This was about answering a question that had been whispered in the highest echelons of power. A question prompted by a signal from the void. A signal that was not a random cosmic burp, but something structured, ancient, and impossibly distant. In response, a program was born. So secret it was denied even to those with the highest security clearances. It had no official name, no budget line, no public face. In the few surviving, heavily redacted documents, it is referred to only by its cryptonym, Project Chimera. This wasn't NASA. This wasn't Roscosmos. This was something else entirely. A splinter entity funded by black budgets and fueled by existential dread. The project's directive was simple and terrifying. Build a vessel capable of reaching the source of the signal and do it before our rivals. The technologies required were decades ahead of their time, reverse engineered from recovered materials that are still classified to this day. Blueprints from the era don't show rockets. They show something more akin to a biological machine. A craft that didn't just travel through space, but interacted with it. We have obtained declassified internal memos, most of the text blacked out, but fragments remain. Phrases like non-linear propulsion, quantum entanglement communication, and psychic resonance dampening are scattered throughout. This was not engineering. It was a desperate leap into theoretical science, a gamble with physics we barely understood. The goal of Project Chimera wasn't exploration. It was interception. It was a preemptive strike against an unknown and potentially unknowable intelligence. The fear was palpable. What if the signal wasn't a greeting, but a countdown? The entire project was housed in a subterranean facility known only as the Anvil, a place wiped from every map. Here, in the sterile silence miles underground, a new kind of history was being forged in absolute secrecy. A history that would culminate in a forgotten mission and a final, chilling transmission from the edge of everything. Narrator. A mission like Chimera could not be crewed by heroes. It required something far more specific. Ghosts. Men and women who, for all official purposes, no longer existed. You won't find their names carved into any memorial wall. Their service records are blank slates, their birth certificates incinerated. They were recruited from the deepest shadows of the intelligence and special operations communities. Individuals with unique psychological profiles, capable of withstanding absolute isolation and pressures beyond human comprehension. They were lone wolves, orphans, individuals whose deaths in training accidents or covert operations had already been convincingly staged years before. They were untethered from the world, making them the perfect candidates for a one-way trip. From fragmented psychiatric evaluations that were leaked by a now discredited source, we can piece together a partial roster. There was Commander Ivan Volkov, a former Spetsnaz operative, a master of zero-gravity combat and survival, declared lost during a submarine incident in the Barents Sea. His file notes a complete lack of emotional affect and a pathological resilience to fear. Then there was Dr. Aris Thorne, a brilliant but disgraced xenolinguist and theoretical physicist from a black site research institute, a man who had delved too deep into forbidden theories. His official cause of death was a lab explosion. His notes speak of communication beyond conventional language, of syntax based on quantum states. And finally, specialist Eva Rostova, a biotelemetry expert whose preternatural abilities in pattern recognition made her more machine than human. She was a product of a clandestine psychic program, a program the government still denies ever existed. Her public record ends at age 12. These were not astronauts in the traditional sense. They were instruments honed for a single, specific purpose. Their training was brutal and esoteric. It involved not just physical endurance, but prolonged sensory deprivation, exposure to mind-altering agents, and simulations of non-Euclidean spatial environments. They were being prepared for a reality that did not conform to our understanding of the universe. They were being broken down and rebuilt into something that could survive the journey to the source of the signal. They were taught to forget their pasts, their names, their very humanity. In the eyes of the project, they were already dead. Their lives were the first cost of Chimera, a down payment made in blood and memory, long before their vessel ever left the ground. They were a crew of ghosts, embarking on a phantom ship, sailing towards an abyss from which no one, not even their handlers, truly expected them to return. Narrator: the launch of Apollo 11 was watched by 500 million people. It was a global event, a symbol of human achievement, broadcast in brilliant color. The launch of the vessel Erebus, the heart of Project Chimera, was witnessed by fewer than a dozen individuals in a lead-lined control room, 2 miles beneath the Siberian tundra. There was no countdown, no thunderous roar of rockets, no pillar of fire ascending into the heavens. The Erebus did not launch in any conventional sense. It simply departed. The date, according to a leaked log entry, was November 4th, 1973. On that day, the world felt nothing. The mission began with a profound and deliberate silence. The launch facility, the Anvil, was a masterpiece of clandestine engineering. Its primary silo doors opened not to the sky, but into a massive, geologically stable cavern. From there, the Erebus engaged its experimental drive. Eyewitness accounts, later recanted under extreme duress, describe not a controlled explosion, but a folding of space, a brief, localized distortion of reality. The air grew cold, a low hum vibrated through the rock, and then the vessel was gone. A single, grainy security camera feed is all that remains. It shows a craft unlike anything ever built. It is matte black, angular, and non-aerodynamic, a brutalist shard of impossible geometry. It has no visible thrusters, no wings, no heat shielding. As its drive engages, the camera footage distorts, colors bleed, and the image tears before cutting to static. Radar stations across the globe, even the most sensitive NORAD installations, registered nothing. The Erebus slipped out of Earth's gravity well like a phantom, leaving no trace of its passage. It was the perfect covert deployment. For the handful of controllers in the Anvil, the silence that followed was absolute. The mission was now in the hands of its ghost crew, traveling faster than light through means that were purely theoretical. Their only link was a quantum entanglement communicator, a device that, in theory, allowed for instantaneous communication across any distance. But for the first 3 years of the mission, it remained silent. The Erebus and its crew had vanished as completely as if they had never existed. Project Chimera had succeeded in its first objective, to send a message into the void without the world ever knowing. But in doing so, they had also created a perfect enigma. A ship and crew, unmoored from time and space, heading towards a destination from which no warnings, no discoveries, and no one could ever be expected to return. Narrator. For 7 years, Project Chimera was a ghost in its own machine. The Anvil was put on standby, its staff reduced to a skeleton crew of monitors, their sole task to watch a silent console for a signal that would likely never arrive. The mission was a failure, a multi-trillion-dollar black hole of resources and lives. Then it happened. On what would have been the 8th year of the mission, a single data packet pulsed into existence on a dusty terminal. It was not a message. It was a scar. The quantum entanglement communicator, which had been inert for nearly a decade, flared to life for exactly 4.7 seconds before burning out catastrophically. The data it relayed was fragmented, corrupted, and deeply, fundamentally wrong. It began with biotelemetry from the crew. But the readings were impossible. Commander Volkov's heart rate was recorded at 400 beats per minute, simultaneously with a core body temperature below freezing. Specialist Rostova's brainwave patterns were no longer human. They matched complex fractal equations. Dr. Thorne's data was simply gone. His channel was a flat line of pure digital silence. Then came the audio. It was not a voice. It was a layered polyphonic sound, a guttural chant mixed with the screech of failing electronics, and something else. Something that sounded disturbingly like organic material being rearranged. In the last half-second of the transmission, a single clear voice broke through the chaos. It was Dr. Thorne. He spoke only 4 words. It sees in echoes. The transmission ended. That was it. The last message from the Erebus. The final testament of its ghost crew. The data was analyzed, dissected, and ultimately classified at a level beyond top secret, codenamed Terminus. The official report concluded the transmission was a result of equipment malfunction and crew psychosis due to prolonged isolation. But those who were there, who saw the raw data, knew better. The telemetry wasn't a malfunction. It was a record of a biological transformation. The sound wasn't noise, it was a language. And Dr. Thorne's final words were not a cry for help. They were a warning. What did they find out there, beyond the edge of our understanding? What is the it that sees in echoes? The Erebus was sent to intercept a signal, but the final transmission suggests that something else, something ancient and vast, intercepted them instead. Project Chimera was shuttered, its records buried, and the Anvil was permanently sealed. The story of the Erebus and its crew was erased, but the transmission remains, a 4-second ghost that haunts the deepest archives of our secret history. A final chilling whisper from a truly forgotten mission. Write in the comments where you are watching from and at what time. so I can get to know you better. To support the channel for free, don't forget to subscribe and like. Some doors in the universe should never be opened. Narrator. The year was 1987. While the world's attention was fixed on the Cold War's final tense chapters, humanity was quietly reaching further into the dark than ever before. The mission was codenamed Venture 7. It does not exist in any public record. Its crew of 4 were handpicked from the most elite, most psychologically resilient astronauts and scientists on the planet. Their objective: a decade-long journey to the Kuiper Belt, the icy, forgotten frontier of our solar system. For 3 years, the mission was a textbook success. A silent ship on a perfect trajectory, sending back mundane telemetry and data on the solar wind. Then, on the 1,104th day of the mission, everything changed. Mission Control received a priority alert from Commander Eva Rostova. It wasn't an emergency, not yet. It was a discovery. The ship's long-range gravimetric sensors had detected something impossible. A phantom signature, a gravitational ripple, where there should have been nothing but empty space. It had no mass, emitted no light, reflected no radiation. Yet, it was there. Back on Earth, in a windowless room buried deep underground, analysts scrambled. They ran diagnostic after diagnostic, convinced it was a sensor ghost, a glitch in the machine. But the data was clean. The signature was real. It was designated Anomaly 734. The science officer aboard Venture 7, Dr. Aris Thorne, chronicled the anomaly in his private audio log, a log that was never supposed to be heard. Dr. Thorne. Day 1105. The object, I hesitate to call it that, continues to pace us. Its gravitational signature is elegant. It mimics the mathematics of a black hole singularity, yet it has none of the associated properties. It's a whisper of gravity. Ava thinks we should alter course. I disagree. This is why we came out here. This is the discovery of a new lifetime, a new everything. Narrator. Thorne's scientific curiosity would soon curdle into something else. Over the next 72 hours, Anomaly 734 began to exert a subtle, yet undeniable influence on the Venture 7. It wasn't a physical force. It was something far more insidious. The ship's quantum entanglement communicator, the most advanced piece of technology on board, began to experience decoherent spikes whenever it was aimed in the anomaly's general direction. Clocks on the ship, synchronized to the atomic second, began to drift, losing milliseconds, then entire seconds, over the course of a single rotation. The crew reported fleeting auditory and visual phenomena, the scent of ozone in the sealed life support system, shadows that moved in their peripheral vision, a persistent, low-frequency hum that engineering couldn't trace. In his final recovered log entry, Dr. Thorne's voice had lost its academic composure. It was replaced by a quiet, gnawing dread. Dr. Thorne. Day 1107. It knows we're here. I don't know how, but it does. The hum, it's not in the ship's systems anymore. It's in our teeth, in our bones. The geometry of the corridors seems wrong today. Eva ordered a course correction. But every time we fire the thrusters, the anomaly is still there. Same distance, same relative position. It's like it's not in space with us. It's attached to us. It's an idea that has found us. Narrator. On Earth, the mission controllers could only watch the bizarre telemetry in horrified silence. They were witnessing the laws of physics being casually rewritten millions of miles away. They sent a direct order. Cease all observation of Anomaly 734. Turn the ship around. Begin immediate burn for home. The acknowledgement from Commander Rostova was a single clipped word: affirmative. It was the last clear transmission they would ever receive. Narrator. Confirmation of the abort command was received by Goldstone Deep Space Communications Complex at 0432 Zulu time. On the main screen in Mission Control, the status of Venture 7 was green. All systems nominal. The ship was turning, preparing its main engine for the long deceleration burn that would begin its journey home. Flight Director Gene Kranz, a veteran of the Apollo era brought out of retirement for this one last clandestine mission, watched his console, his jaw tight. He trusted his crew, but he did not trust the unknown they had stumbled upon. At 0437 Zulu, as the Venture 7's orientation thrusters fired in their final sequence, every single light on the mission status board flipped from green to red, then went dark. A single stark message appeared on the screen. No carrier signal. Telemetry lost. Comms lost. Everything was gone. Absolute, total silence. In the world of deep space communication, signals can be disrupted by solar flares, blocked by planetary bodies, or weakened by distance. But for every single data packet, from the ship's heartbeat life support monitor to its high-gain antenna's position, to vanish at the exact same microsecond is not a malfunction. It is an impossibility. It is an event. The protocol for loss of signal was clear. Wait. The ship's autonomous systems would attempt to re-establish a link every 60 seconds. In the control room, the oppressive silence was broken only by the quiet clicks of engineers typing commands that went unanswered. The mission clock on the wall became a monolith, each second stretching into an eternity. 1 minute passed. Kranz's voice, captured on the open room recording, was unnaturally calm. Kranz. All right, people, settle down. Work the problem. Comms, what are you seeing? Anything? A whisper? Controller. Negative, Flight. It's not just weak. It's a hole. The background radiation of the universe is there, but where Venture 7 should be, there is absolutely nothing. The spectrum is flat, clean. Narrator. 5 minutes. The engineers had exhausted every protocol. They sent emergency pings on every frequency, from low-band radio to high-frequency maser. The void simply swallowed them. The calm in the room began to fray. Whispers turned to hushed, frantic arguments. Was it the reactor? A catastrophic core breach would have been instantaneous, but it would have left a radiological signature, a flash of energy. There was nothing. Was it a navigational error? Did they somehow fly into an uncharted object? Impossible. Space in that sector was emptier than any human had ever experienced. 10 minutes. The psychological weight of the silence became unbearable. This wasn't just a lost ship. It was a lost crew. 4 souls, further from home than anyone in history, had simply been erased. Kranz stood over the comms officer's shoulder, staring at the flat line on the oscilloscope, a graphical representation of nothing. He had faced crises that threatened to kill astronauts in minutes, but this was different. This was a quiet, cosmic, vanishing act. The official mission log for this period is a testament to the growing desperation. Entries every 30 seconds read, no uplink, negative contact, no response to ping. Then, at 14 minutes and 21 seconds into the silence, a single light on the board flickered from black to amber. A carrier signal. Impossibly weak, degraded, and buried in an ocean of static. Someone in the room gasped. Kranz leaned into his microphone, his voice tight. "Venture, this is Houston. We read you. Barely. Talk to us." The room held its breath. The silence was over. But the horror was just beginning. Narrator. A carrier signal is not a voice. It is the potential for one. For 30 agonizing seconds, that was all they had. A ghostly electronic whisper, promising a message from a crew they thought was already gone. Engineers worked frantically, filtering the signal, amplifying what little they could, trying to pull a voice out of the storm. And then, it came through. It was not the calm, professional voice of Commander Eva Rostova. The sound that bled from the speakers in mission control was a tapestry of terror. The audio file, designated VB1107 Final, remains one of the most highly classified recordings in existence. Leaked transcripts and whistleblower accounts are all we have to piece together what was said in those final moments. The first discernible sound was not human. It was a low, resonant pulse, described by one controller as the sound of grinding rocks the size of moons. Layered over it was a high-frequency shriek that defied acoustic analysis. Then, through the chaos, a voice. It was Commander Rostova, but her words were broken, her breathing ragged and panicked. Rostova. Not a ship. It's unfolding. Oh God, the angles. The angles are wrong. It's not possible. Thorne. He just came apart. Not blood. Geometry. Narrator. The transmission cuts to a burst of pure static. Then another voice. This one belonging to the ship's pilot, Major Ben Carter. He isn't speaking, he is screaming. It is not a scream of pain, but of pure, undiluted madness. He is repeating a single phrase over and over. Carter. It sees in shapes. It sees in shapes. It sees in shapes. Narrator. The mission controllers could only listen, paralyzed. The sterile scientific environment of the control room had been violated, transformed into the audience for a transmission from hell itself. They were hearing the sound of the human mind breaking under the strain of witnessing the impossible. The final and most chilling part of the broadcast came from Rostova again. Her voice was suddenly calm, devoid of all emotion. It was a flat, monotone recitation, as if she were no longer the one speaking. The words she spoke were not English, not Russian, not any known human language. Yet the controllers who heard it swore they could understand the intent behind them. They were words of invitation, of revelation, of a terrible, beautiful truth waiting in the dark. The final, intelligible English words were spoken by her, just before the signal cut out for the last time. Her voice was a ghost, a hollow echo. Rostova. The stars are opening. We are the key. It's not an ending. It's a transfiguration. Don't look for us. Narrator. Then silence. Not the empty silence of a lost signal, but a sudden violent cut, as if the broadcast itself had been severed at the source. The carrier signal vanished. The flat line returned. For a full minute, no one in mission control moved or spoke. They had been tasked with overseeing a mission to the edge of the solar system. Instead, they had become unwilling witnesses to an encounter with something that lay beyond the edge of human comprehension. The final broadcast of Venture 7 lasted only 94 seconds. But its contents would be covered up for decades, its existence denied, its terrifying message locked away in the deepest vaults on Earth. A stark warning that we are not alone, and that our understanding of the universe is terrifyingly incomplete. Narrator. On January 12, 1988, nearly 6 months after Venture 7 vanished, a 30-page report was quietly circulated among a select few within the Department of Defense and NASA. It was the mission's official epitaph. Its title was Venture Program, Mission V7 Post-Failure Analysis. There was no mention of Anomaly 734, No reference to a 14-minute silence, and certainly no transcript of the final horrifying broadcast. Instead, the report was a masterpiece of bureaucratic fiction, a carefully constructed narrative designed to close the book on Venture 7 forever. I have here a declassified, though heavily redacted, copy of that report's summary. It reads, "Analysis of fragmentary telemetry preceding signal loss indicates a high probability of a cascading failure originating in the tertiary coolant loop of the ship's nuclear reactor. It is hypothesized that a micrometeoroid strike of significant velocity caused the initial breach. This led to a rapid core overheat, compromising primary life support and all communication systems simultaneously. The loss of Venture 7 and its crew is concluded to be the result of a catastrophic, unrecoverable equipment failure. A micrometeoroid, a coolant leak. It was a simple, plausible, and entirely fabricated explanation. It was an answer for the files, a way to bury the truth under layers of technical jargon and plausible deniability. The problem is, it doesn't fit the facts. A micrometeoroid strike would have been detected by the ship's impact sensors. No such alert was ever received. A reactor breach would have produced a massive burst of gamma radiation. The sector of space where Venture 7 disappeared remains radiologically pristine, and no equipment malfunction, no matter how catastrophic, could explain the final 94 seconds of audio that was seared into the minds of everyone in mission control that day. The cover-up was as swift as it was total. Within hours of the final transmission, the control room was sealed by military personnel. All logs, tapes, and notes were confiscated under national security protocols. The mission controllers and engineers were taken to a secure facility where they were debriefed for weeks. They were told that what they heard was the result of oxygen deprivation, mass hallucination brought on by the stress of the event. They were then forced to sign binding non-disclosure agreements, threatening imprisonment for treason if they ever spoke of what truly happened. The Venture program was officially scrubbed. Its budget was reallocated, its personnel reassigned. In the public sphere, it was as if it never existed. But secrets like this have a way of festering. Over the years, whispers have emerged from retired engineers, anonymous deathbed confessions. They speak of the tape in the vault, the audio file that is played only for a select few. A chilling reminder of why we should stop searching for what lies in the dark between the stars. The official record says, Venture 7 was lost to the cold, indifferent mechanics of space. But those who know, those who were there, understand that the crew of Venture 7 were not victims of a failure. They were messengers, conduits for a final, terrifying broadcast, a warning that the universe is far stranger and far more hostile than we have ever dared to imagine. Their mission was forgotten, but their last words echo in the silence, waiting to be heard again. Write in the comments where you are watching from and at what time, so I can get to know you better. To support the channel for free, don't forget to subscribe and like. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed again. Welcome back to the Obsidian Archive. For every official story, there is an ocean of paper it floats upon. Memos, reports, requisitions, and after-action summaries. But for Mission Hesperus 4, that ocean is ink black and unreadable. When initial inquiries were made in the decades following its disappearance, investigators were met with a wall of bureaucratic silence. Freedom of Information Act requests returned years later, not with answers, but with insults. thousands of pages where the only legible text was the letterhead and the date. The rest was a sea of thick black bars, a testament to a secret deemed too dangerous to ever see the light of day. These are the Hesperus 4 files, or what remains of them. They are a monument to concealment. What could possibly justify this level of secrecy for a simple deep space probe mission? The official line was national security, a convenient catch-all phrase used to bury mistakes, scandals, and truths too terrifying for public consumption. But independent researchers operating in the shadows pieced together fragments from other, less guarded projects. They found procurement orders for materials not rated for deep space, but for extreme biological and radiological containment. They unearthed personnel transfers, moving not just astrophysicists and engineers to the project, but also xenolinguists and theoretical parapsychologists, specialties that have no place on a mission to chart stellar nurseries. The redactions weren't just hiding technical specifications or orbital mechanics. They were hiding the mission's true purpose. The black ink conceals names, locations, and objectives, but it also reveals a pattern. The heaviest redactions cluster around two key areas: the final 48 hours before the last transmission and the cargo manifest. Whatever Hesperus 4 was carrying, and whatever it encountered in those final hours, was the heart of the secret. We managed to obtain a single, partially unredacted page through a confidential source. It's a fragment of a pre-launch psychological evaluation for the mission's single human occupant, Commander Eva Rostova. Most of it is gone, but one line, missed by the censor's pen, remains. It reads, "Subject displays unprecedented resilience to mimetic and paradoxical cognitive hazards." Mimetic hazards. Information that is dangerous to simply know. This wasn't a mission of exploration. It was a mission of contact. And the official record is a carefully constructed tombstone, designed to ensure no one ever goes looking for the body. Armed with the whistleblower's raw data file, we approached a collective of independent audio engineers and data analysts who specialize in forensic signal processing. They work in anonymity, driven by a desire to uncover truths buried in noise. For weeks, they subjected the Hesperus 4 transmission to every analytical tool at their disposal. The file was less than 2 minutes long, a chaotic blend of white noise, solar interference, and what sounded like a human voice, twisted and distorted beyond recognition. The first breakthrough came from spectrographic analysis. When the audio was converted into a visual representation of its frequencies, a hidden structure emerged. Embedded within the seemingly random static was a complex, geometric pattern, a perfect, repeating fractal that was mathematically impossible to occur naturally. It was a watermark, a signature. Something had intentionally encoded this pattern into the noise. This confirmed the whistleblower's claim. The signal was not just a malfunction. It was engineered. The team then focused on the voice. Using advanced filtering algorithms, they began to peel back the layers of distortion. They isolated what they believed was Commander Rostova's voice, but it was speaking in no known language. The phonetics were alien, the cadence rhythmic, almost liturgical. It was a chant or a recitation. But behind her voice, once the primary signal was isolated and removed, was something else. A whisper. A low, guttural frequency that the human ear could barely perceive. When pitch shifted and amplified, it resolved into a series of clicks and pulses, a binary-like staccato. It was this secondary signal that held the true message. The analysts believe Rostova was not speaking, but was being spoken through. She was a conduit. The binary clicks were run through every decryption model imaginable: military, financial, academic. Nothing worked. It was only when a cryptographer on the team suggested using the fractal pattern from the static as a decryption key that the lock turned. The result was not a sentence or a paragraph. It was a single repeating data packet. A set of coordinates, a stellar chart, and a complex equation that modern physics has no model for. The coordinates did not point to a star or a planet. They pointed to a location in the Oort cloud of a distant, dead star system, a place of absolute cold and darkness. And the equation, it wasn't physics. It was a biological sequence, a genetic map for something that is not of this Earth. The coordinates, the equation. The story of Hesperus 4 ends not with a period, but with an ellipsis that stretches into the void. What became of Commander Eva Rostova? The official record, if it were ever to be unsealed, would list her as lost in the line of duty, a hero who gave her life for exploration. But the truth we have uncovered suggests a different fate. She was not lost. She arrived. The transmission was not a cry for help. It was a confirmation of delivery. She was the payload, and she reached her destination. We are left to contemplate a chilling possibility. Is she still out there, in the cold darkness at the edge of a dead solar system? Perhaps no longer entirely human, a vessel for a consciousness that chose her as its first emissary. Or perhaps the entity she encountered was not biological in a way we can comprehend. The genetic map in the signal may not be a blueprint for a life form, but for a piece of information, a mimetic virus designed to rewrite the observer. In this scenario, Rostova ceased to exist in that final moment, her mind and body becoming the first alien artifact on human soil. A silent beacon waiting for a signal to activate. The agency's fear, the reason for the decades of secrecy, becomes terrifyingly clear. They weren't afraid of an alien invasion in the traditional sense. They were afraid of infection. They received a message they could not understand, from a place they could not comprehend. And in their hubris, they sent a lone observer to knock on the door. And something answered. The final question is the most unsettling. Was the transmission a warning, a greeting, or was it an invitation? The data packet we decrypted is now out in the world. The coordinates are known. The equation is being studied. The door that Commander Rostova opened has been unlocked for anyone with the means to find it. The forgotten mission may be over, but the observation has just begun. And we are no longer the only ones watching. Write in the comments where you are watching from and at what time, so I can get to know you better. To support the channel for free, don't forget to subscribe and like. Some signals are not meant to be found. Welcome back to the Obsidian Archive. We return to the silent abyss where the starship Odyssey vanished. The official narrative, hastily compiled and classified under the Starlight Accord of 1987, cites a catastrophic micrometeoroid shower, leading to explosive decompression. A neat, tidy, and utterly unbelievable explanation. Because when you peel back the layers of redacted reports and look at the raw data, the final chaotic stream of numbers sent across the void, the official story doesn't just fray, it disintegrates. This is where our investigation reopens. The telemetry. For 47.3 seconds before total signal loss, the Odyssey's automated systems broadcast a torrent of data that mission control analysts at the time labeled incoherent and spurious. But they weren't incoherent. They were impossible. The ship's primary gyroscope, a marvel of engineering designed to remain stable under extreme G-forces, began to tumble erratically, indicating the vessel was pitching and yawing in a way no known gravitational force could induce. Simultaneously, its external temperature sensors, which should have read near absolute zero, spiked to over 1,500 degrees Celsius on the port side, while the starboard side plunged to a temperature so low it defied our understanding of thermodynamics. This wasn't a fire, it was a physical paradox. Then there was the velocity data. The Odyssey was on a fixed, predictable trajectory. Yet, in its final moments, the telemetry showed a sudden, massive deceleration, as if it had hit a wall in the middle of empty space. This was immediately followed by a lateral vector shift of 22 degrees, a maneuver that would have required a thrust equivalent to detonating a nuclear device against the hull, an event that would have instantly vaporized the ship. Yet all other systems reported nominal engine status. These weren't sensor glitches. Multiple independent systems all reported the same impossible physics. It was as if the ship was being held, cooked, and twisted by an unseen, localized force. The most damning piece of data, buried in a subchannel usually reserved for cosmic background radiation analysis, was a gravitational lensing measurement. The ship's long-range sensors detected a distortion in space-time directly ahead of it, a massive gravity well where nothing should be. It was 10 times the gravitational signature of Jupiter, yet it was optically invisible. The official report attributes all of this to a cascading system failure caused by a single micrometeoroid, a single grain of sand that somehow managed to rewrite the laws of physics in its immediate vicinity before vanishing without a trace. The contradiction is not just in the numbers. It's in the very fabric of the official explanation. The telemetry doesn't tell a story of an accident. It screams a story of an encounter. A machine can report impossible data, but it is the human element that gives the terror its voice. Who were the three souls aboard the Odyssey? The mission commander, Dr. Aris Thorne, a stoic astrophysicist with a legendary reputation for calm under pressure. His psychological profile, declassified in 2003, described him as exhibiting supreme emotional regulation and incapable of panic. The mission specialist, Dr. Lena Petrova, a xenobotanist and communications expert, was noted for her empathetic resonance and unflappable optimism. The pilot, Commander Kenji Tanaka, a former test pilot, was the Rock, a man whose biometrics remained steady even during simulated catastrophic failures that would break most astronauts. These were, on paper, the most stable and resilient human beings ever sent into deep space. They were selected from thousands of candidates, put through psychological trials that bordered on torture, and emerged as the perfect crew. For 6 months, their transmissions were a model of professionalism. They reported findings, shared jokes with mission control, and performed their duties with meticulous precision. Their voice logs were calm. Their personal journal entries, also recovered via data burst, were reflective and focused. But in the final 48 hours leading up to the last transmission, a chilling transformation began. The voice logs, once clear and concise, became fragmented. Commander Tanaka, the stoic pilot, is heard breathing heavily, his heart rate, logged by his biosensor, spiking to 180 beats per minute while the ship was in a state of calm cruising. He makes a single cryptic entry in the ship's log. It's in the blind spot. It's always in the blind spot. Dr. Petrova, the optimist, is heard in a strained conversation with Thorne, her voice trembling. "It doesn't make sense, Aris. The patterns, they're not random. They're responsive." The most disturbing change came from Commander Thorne himself. In the final audio fragment recovered before the telemetry went wild, Thorne, the man incapable of panic, is not speaking to mission control or even to his crew. He is whispering. The audio is heavily distorted, but spectral analysis reveals a single repeated phrase, spoken with an unnerving mix of terror and reverence. Oculi spectant inanes, Latin for "the eyes are watching, but they are empty." The official addendum to their psychological files suggests the onset of acute, shared psychosis brought on by prolonged isolation. But this wasn't a gradual decline. It was a sudden, unified break from reality that perfectly coincided with the ship's first impossible sensor readings. The profiles said they were the best of us. Stable, rational, unbreakable. But the final records from the forgotten mission don't show 3 astronauts. They show 3 brilliant minds being systematically dismantled by something they could not comprehend, their sanity unraveling in perfect sync with the laws of physics outside their viewport. When conventional explanations fail, we are forced to look towards the unconventional, towards the theories that live in the shadows of official denial. The first, and most persistent, theory surrounding the loss of the Odyssey is that it did not suffer a malfunction, but that it found something. Or rather, something found it. Let us re-examine the evidence through this lens. The telemetry data. A massive, invisible, gravitational anomaly. A non-human intelligence, operating on principles of physics beyond our grasp, could easily manifest as such a phenomenon. A vessel capable of manipulating space-time itself would appear on sensors not as an object, but as a rupture in reality. The extreme localized temperature fluctuations could be a byproduct of an energy shield or a propulsion system we can't comprehend. The impossible lateral maneuver wasn't the Odyssey's engines firing. It was the ship being forcibly moved, like a chess piece on a board. Now consider the human element, the crew's rapid psychological decline. This wasn't simple isolation-induced psychosis. It was a reaction to an external stimulus. Commander Tanaka's comment, "It's in the blind spot," suggests something that could position itself perfectly outside the ship's visual range, yet its presence was known. Dr. Petrova's observation of responsive patterns points towards an intelligence, a deliberate interaction. And Commander Thorne's final haunting whisper, "The eyes are watching, but they are empty," becomes the centerpiece of this theory. It is the testimony of a man staring at the face of something utterly alien, something that could see, that could perceive, but that possessed an intelligence so foreign it registered to him as a void. The final transmission itself, that 47-second burst of noise and screaming, contained something else. When the human voices are filtered out, a low-frequency, rhythmic signal remains. It's not random static. It has a complex repeating structure, almost like a language, but one that operates on mathematical principles that have stumped our best cryptographers. Proponents of the encounter theory argue this was a message, the final thing the Odyssey broadcast, not from its own systems, but through them. Was the Odyssey destroyed? Or was it simply taken? Removed from our plane of existence by an entity that viewed it as a curiosity, a microbe to be placed under a cosmic microscope. The official report dismisses this as science fiction. But the data, the gravitational lensing, the impossible maneuvers, the structured signal hidden in the noise, and the unified, specific psychological collapse of a perfect crew, tells a story that fits the impossible far better than a single magical micrometeoroid. It's the story of a forgotten mission that fulfilled its ultimate purpose, to make first contact, and in doing so, paid the ultimate price. While the specter of an alien encounter is compelling, a darker, more intimate theory lurks within the mission's classified files. This theory posits that the threat to the Odyssey did not come from the void outside, but from the pressurized confines of the ship itself. This is the theory of sabotage. Let's discard the exotic and focus on the plausible. Every piece of impossible data could be reinterpreted as a system being deliberately pushed past its breaking point. That sudden, massive deceleration, it could be a catastrophic failure caused by a manual override of the engine's safety protocols, an intentional explosive reverse thrust. The wild temperature spikes, not an external force, but perhaps a coolant line being intentionally severed, causing one side of the ship to superheat, while venting the freezing coolant against the other. The tumbling gyroscopes could be the result of a violent struggle for the controls inside the cockpit. In this light, the psychological breakdown of the crew is not a reaction to an external entity, but the cause of the entire disaster. The official report mentions shared psychosis, but what if it wasn't shared? What if one crew member broke and the others were reacting to it? Let's look again at the profiles. Commander Thorne, the man of supreme emotional regulation. What if that regulation was merely a mask for a deep-seated pathology that only emerged under the true pressure of deep space? His final Latin phrase, "The eyes are watching, but they are empty," could be interpreted not as seeing an alien, but as a moment of nihilistic, philosophical collapse. A man staring into the abyss and deciding to pull his crewmates in with him. Commander Tanaka's paranoia about a blind spot could have been directed at a fellow crew member, someone he no longer trusted. The fragmented audio logs could be evidence of arguments, of a breakdown in the chain of command. The final garbled transmission, the screams, could be the sounds of a mutiny or a murder-suicide millions of miles from home. This theory is supported by a single, heavily redacted document in the mission archive. It's a pre-flight psychiatric memo from an independent reviewer, flagging Dr. Aris Thorne for potential messianic complexes and a philosophical obsession with the concept of a transformative void. The review was overruled by the mission board, who favored Thorne's impeccable service record. Was Thorne trying to fly his ship into what he believed was a higher state of being? Was he a saboteur, driven not by malice, but by a twisted sense of purpose? This theory is, in many ways, more terrifying than an alien encounter. It suggests that the greatest monster we could find in the dark is the one we brought with us. The Odyssey wasn't taken by a cosmic horror, it was destroyed by a human one. The forgotten mission didn't end because they found something new, but because they couldn't escape something ancient, the capacity for human self-destruction. Write in the comments where you are watching from and at what time, so I can get to know you better. To support the channel for free, don't forget to subscribe and like. Some truths, buried for millennia under miles of ice, carry a contagion worse than any virus. In our previous explorations of the last transmission from Project Boreas, we've considered external threats and technological malfunction. But our third theory turns the lens inward, suggesting the horror didn't come from outside the base, but from within the very minds of the crew. This is the theory of the Cassandra Strain. It posits that the Boreas team, in their deep core ice drilling, unearthed something that had lain dormant since before the dawn of humanity, a prehistoric, extremophile microorganism. This wasn't a pathogen in the conventional sense, attacking the body's cells. Its vector was far more insidious. It was a psychotropic agent, a biological key that unlocked the most primitive and terrifying corners of the human psyche. The name Cassandra Strain is a chillingly apt moniker, borrowed from the tragic Greek prophetess, whose true warnings were doomed to be dismissed as madness. The theory suggests that as the crew members became infected, perhaps through inhalation of ancient air trapped in ice core samples or direct contact, their perceptions of reality began to warp. The first stage, according to a heavily redacted and likely apocryphal medical report, leaked from a sympathetic source within the intelligence community, would have been heightened sensory perception. Colors would seem brighter, sound sharper. The ever-present Antarctic wind would feel like a living entity, whispering at the edge of hearing. This would quickly devolve into acute paranoia. Team members, once trusted colleagues, who depended on each other for survival, would begin to see conspiracy and malice in every glance. The report details a projected cascade failure of social cohesion, where the intricate psychological balance required to survive in such an isolated environment would be irrevocably shattered. Finally, the strain would trigger vivid, waking nightmares, hallucinations drawn from the deepest recesses of ancestral fear. The final transmission in this light ceases to be a coherent message. It becomes a transcript of collective psychosis. The fragmented sentences, the overlapping screams, the references to eyes in the ice, and the song from the bottom of the world are not descriptions of an external monster, but the verbal outpourings of minds being unwritten by a biological entity they could not comprehend. This theory explains the lack of any physical evidence of a struggle or an intruder at the abandoned Boreas site. The enemy was invisible, airborne, and already inside them. The base wasn't breached, it was hollowed out from within. The tragedy of the Cassandra Strain is not just that the crew of Project Boreas died, but that in their final hours, they were forced to live through their own personal hells, unable to trust their own senses or the faces of their friends. Their final words, a warning that sounded to the outside world like nothing more than the ravings of madmen. To understand the potential context of Project Boreas, we must turn our attention to its more famous and officially sanctioned contemporary Vostok Station. Established by the Soviet Union in 1957 at the southern pole of cold, Vostok is a legend in polar research, a symbol of human endurance against the planet's most inhospitable conditions. For decades, its primary mission was the deep drilling of the ice sheet, yielding invaluable climate data. But beneath the station, under 2 miles of solid ice, lies its greatest secret. Lake Vostok, a subglacial lake of primordial water, isolated from the rest of the world for at least 15 million years. What if Project Boreas wasn't just another research initiative? What if it was a covert, off-the-books operation running parallel to Vostok, tasked with investigating something the Soviets had detected but couldn't publicly acknowledge? The theory of the Vostok echoes suggests just that. According to fragmented intelligence chatter from the era, Soviet deep ice sonar arrays had picked up anomalous signals emanating not from the lake itself, but from a geologically distinct region several hundred kilometers away, precisely where Project Boreas was established. These weren't random geological noises. They were described in one translated memo as intermittent, complex, and seemingly patterned. The Soviets, locked in the Cold War and wary of revealing a potential discovery of immense significance, couldn't divert their primary mission. Instead, a back-channel communication may have prompted the establishment of the clandestine, multinational Project Boreas to investigate the source of these echoes. The crew of Boreas, then, were not just scientists. They were scouts, sent to make first contact with a phenomenon of unknown origin. This reframes the final transmission entirely. It could have been their one and only status report on the nature of the Vostok echo. Phrases like, "It's not a sound," and "It answers the drilling," suddenly take on a terrifying new meaning. Were they communicating with something? Or awakening it? This theory is bolstered by a strange incident reported by the Russian team at Vostok in 2012. When they finally breached the lake, they lost contact with their probe for a period, and initial water samples were subject to intense, almost paranoid levels of quarantine. Officially, this was standard procedure. But to those who study the Boreas case, it felt like a haunting echo of a past catastrophe. It felt like the Russians, having learned from the silent fate of Project Boreas, were taking no chances. The legacy of the forgotten mission became an unwritten chapter in the Vostok Operations Manual, a ghost story told to new recruits to ensure they followed protocol to the letter. The final transmission was the first shot in a conversation we were never meant to have, and its echoes still reverberate in the silent waters beneath Vostok, a warning that some discoveries come at an unbearable price. Perhaps the most disturbing theory has nothing to do with aliens, monsters, or ancient plagues. Perhaps the most terrifying answer is the most human one: a cover-up. The legacy of silence theory posits that the last transmission from Project Boreas was not garbled, and it was not the product of madness. It was clear, concise, and so utterly world-shattering that the powers that be decided to erase the mission from existence. In this scenario, the fragmented, static-laden version of the tape we have is a fabrication, a carefully degraded piece of disinformation released to discredit anyone who got too close. The real recording, locked in a vault deeper than any Antarctic ice core, contains the full, horrifying truth. What could they have found that would warrant such an extreme reaction? A piece of technology that defies physics? Incontrovertible proof of a pre-human civilization? The coordinates to something entering our solar system? Whatever it was, the decision was made at the highest levels of global power. Humanity was not ready. The cover-up would have been systematic and ruthless. Project Boreas was officially reclassified as a logistical failure, its records buried under a mountain of unrelated Antarctic survey data. The crew members' families were given a cover story: a catastrophic fire, a crevasse collapse, plausible tragedies in an unforgiving environment. They were given medals, pensions, and a stern warning about the importance of national security. The silence was absolute. Any journalist, academic, or amateur sleuth who started connecting the dots would find their efforts stonewalled. Research grants would be denied, sources would suddenly go silent, and crucial documents would be inexplicably lost in archives. This theory is compelling because of the sheer absence of information. For a mission of its supposed scope and international importance, Project Boreas is a ghost, in the official record. There are no mission patches, no celebratory press releases, no detailed crew manifests available to the public. It's a vacuum. This legacy of silence is, in itself, a form of evidence. The energy required to maintain such a perfect void for decades suggests the secret it protects is of monumental importance. The final transmission, therefore, is the motive for the crime. It is the patient zero of the cover-up. The voices on that tape weren't just reporting a discovery. They were signing their own death warrant and sealing their legacy as footnotes in a history that was never allowed to be written. The silence surrounding Project Boreas isn't empty. It's heavy, weighted with the gravity of the secret it keeps. It's a silence that screams louder than any static-filled cry for help ever could. We have journeyed deep into the frozen heart of the greatest mystery of the 20th century. We have sifted through redacted files, analyzed competing theories, and listened to the ghostly whispers of the past. We've considered a non-human entity awakened from its slumber, a mind-altering pathogen born from the ice, and a cold, calculated conspiracy of silence. Yet after all of this, we are left where we began, with a single fragmented piece of audio tape and a profound, chilling silence. The last transmission from Project Boreas. Let us listen one more time, with the weight of all we've discussed. What is the ultimate truth behind these words? Was this a warning to stay away? The final prayer of a crew facing an unimaginable end? Or was it an invitation? A siren song from the bottom of the world, daring us to come and find the answers for ourselves? The true legacy of Project Boreas is not in what they found, but in the questions their disappearance forces us to ask. It reminds us that for all our technology and all our knowledge, our maps still have blank spaces. Antarctica remains a continent of secrets, a place where the rules of our world may not apply, guarded by an unforgiving climate that has swallowed expeditions whole. The unanswered question is the core of the human experience. It is the engine of exploration and the source of our deepest fears. What happened to the men and women of Project Boreas? We may never know for certain. Their story serves as a stark monument to the terrifying possibility that sometimes, when we shout into the abyss, something answers back. The static on the tape may have faded, but the mystery endures. A cold spot in our collective history. A final unanswered question echoing from a long-forgotten mission at the end of the world. The question is not just what they said. The question is, are we still listening?